Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network.
There we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
What was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Milcom seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Audietes, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, sponsored by Full Pool Wines, Hacks and Ferments, and our subscribers. We're recording on Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our producer, Lickett. This is the mailbag for June. We're running a little late, but we are going to give a little bit of a brief recap of the Austin game, give some high-level thoughts on that, but we have a lot of questions, so we're going to spend most of the time on those. But how you doing, Aaron?
This has been the longest 3 weeks of my working life.
Yeah.
I am running on fumes, to say the least, but we got a holiday coming up here, so I'm looking forward to that. And otherwise trying to ignore everything happening outside of the soccer world.
Well, it's been, I'll tell you, not to get too into banter, but my kids are in summer vacation now, as the most of Seattle is, and they've each done a camp, and then we're going to have a couple weeks of lull, and then August is going to get crazy for us. So I'm trying to kind of enjoy this early part of summer. But this Austin game was I think a much needed result for the Sounders. They came in, we talked a lot about last week how there was this sense of momentum building around the Sounders, even though they had lost 5 in a row. And first time in a single season the Sounders had ever lost 5 in a row. But in order to actually use that momentum, they needed to get a win against Austin, I thought. And they did that. They were, I think, professional in the way they did it. They, the XG was relatively even. I think that's mostly a result of the game state, because the game, when the Sounders took the 2-0 lead relatively early in the second half, they had been pretty dominant. I thought they had controlled the game, and then the game started to open up a little bit in some ways, and I think most of the chances that Austin had came after the Sounders were already up 2-0. So I don't know. I thought they performed well. They did the things. They didn't blow their. I think it was interesting in the post game locker room. It was maybe the least excited I've seen a victorious locker room in the Sounders. It was just very going about our business. They weren't mad or anything, but just not nearly as high. And I think that's to be understood, because I think they were sort of coming off this really exciting period in the Club World Cup, and beating Austin just didn't have the same juice. But I don't think that showed in the performance.
Yeah, I think that they looked like a team that knew they were better than the opponent, which has not always been the case. It's been a complaint I've had about this team for off and on periods for as long as I've been a Sounders fan. But I think especially the last couple of years when they've struggled, they play teams that they're clearly better than, and they don't seem to understand that. And I think just they did what they needed to do, and they, I wasn't in the locker room obviously, but I think that that's a decent mindset to be in, right? To look like that you should be Austin at home. And I think it's got to be really hard to go to the Club World Cup and play PSG and play Atletico Madrid and not be outclassed and feel any other way than, well, we should beat Austin FC at home. Like that's
Right.
not a good team.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned the XG because it gives me a chance to talk about my favorite subject, which is single game XG and how it's how misleading it can be. And I think that this game is a great example of it.
Yeah.
I thought the Sounders were very clearly the better team up until they got the second goal. Austin's expected goals came on 11 shots, one of which was on target. And I think that just kind of it's an additive thing, right? If you take 11 low XG shots, that's going to add up, right? You're gonna get close to that one mark, which is where they ended up. And I just if you take your chances, you don't need to keep taking bad shots and trying to force something to make something happen. You can hang on to possession. But I was very pleased with the performance. I think it was exactly the kind of performance they needed, and yeah, it felt good. It felt like you need more than one win, especially against a bad team at home, to feel like the things are back on the right track. But I feel confident that they will be now, right? I feel pretty good about the direction of the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have a much better test against Columbus this Sunday. The game's gonna be actually the Sunday night soccer kind of featured game of the week on Apple TV. But I think that's gonna be a much better test. It's but it's a game that they should win. But the most encouraging thing I thought from this game is there was some potential for it to be sort of a face planty game. Alex Roldan was forced to play center back. They had no natural, they only had one natural center back available. That was Jackson Reagan. And I got to say, I think Jackson Reagan has been very good since the Club World Cup, and he looked very good in this game as well. He had a couple actually decent looks at goal even. But Alex, I thought, was really good at center back, so good that I almost would be open to the idea of him playing there more often. Maybe not, I'm not saying he should be displacing Yamar or Kim Ki-hee or even Stuart Hawkins, but I appreciated the way he played there. I thought he looked very confident. And I think some of that is Austin was a good matchup for him, especially at home. Austin does not want to have the ball a lot. They didn't put him under a lot of pressure, but Brandon Vasquez is a big boy. He's a dangerous player. They Austin has some dangerous players. They just didn't look very dangerous in this game at all.
No, they didn't. I thought that the Sounders really, really controlled the game. I think that I was also impressed with Alex, so I'm not trying to neg him or take anything away from his performance because I thought he was great. And I agree with you. I think it's really nice to know that he's got that in the toolbox. But I think the Sounders did such a good job of controlling the game in pretty much every other phase that it did make his life easier. I think that if the Sounders are getting overrun in the midfield, that's a much tougher assignment for Alex. It's a much tougher assignment for anybody, right? But I just think it speaks to the performance of the whole team, right? That Austin really wasn't able to exploit a potential matchup advantage there. But he did play really well, and I think the game state allowed him to do things that he's really good at in possession, and give the Sounders a slightly different look at center back, which could really come in handy in certain game states. If they've got a situation where they want to get some more attacking talent on the field, chasing a goal. Having Alex slide back into center back could be a really valuable thing to have. Having somebody like Alex and Jackson Reagan back there able to start attacks, it would be a really beneficial thing to exploit if the opportunity arises, I think.
Yeah, the other player who I think it deserves, well, I think we can both say that Obed Vargas, Christian Roldan were again very good. They were probably the key to sort of shielding Alex from having to do anything. But the other player who I was pretty happy with up until he sort of fell apart there at the end was Reed Baker Whiting, who, he wasn't great, but I think he again showed why people are intrigued by him playing more. It's not that he does anything so spectacularly well. It's just that he's a good connector. He's a strong defender. Now, he picked up 2 pretty dumb yellow cards. He didn't need to handle the ball that he handled, and then he definitely didn't need to sort of go, like, he ends up leaving his foot in, which is the most frustrating part of that tackle that gets him sent off, is that if he just goes in on the tackle, he's probably fine. But then he sort of like threw his leg up to impede the run, and that's what gets him the yellow, I think. And
Yeah.
I just want him to be smarter. That's the second time he's been sent off with 2 yellow cards. I think that's the only 2 times he's ever been ejected from a game. So, I don't want to over index on this being a thing that he does, but it is notable that both times he picked up both cards in quick succession, late in games where he was pushing himself beyond where he has he has not played a lot of 90-minute games. And, and so I don't know, but I think the solve for that is you got to kind of you just got to let him keep playing 90 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think that I can live with mistakes like these from a kid his age with his experience level. I really like what he brings to the field. I think that people at this point know how I feel about Nuhu. I didn't see anything in this game that made me think, I don't know, maybe he's not ready yet for more minutes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought it's unfortunate. I felt really bad for him because I think as soon as the whistle went, you could see in his body language he realized what he had
Yeah.
done and that he was
Yeah.
gone. And I do feel bad for him, but that's a learning experience. I'm glad that it happened when the Sounders were up 2-0 and cruising. That definitely makes it a little bit easier to stomach. So you live and you learn. If he's still making mistakes like that with consistency, next season, after getting a lot more minutes, then that's a problem. But I think at this point he just looks like a young guy who, as you said, sometimes loses his head when he's trying to push himself late in games.
Yeah, and I guess I should add he did play 90 minutes against Atletico Madrid. So, it's not like this is completely foreign to him. He has he does have a one other 90-minute performance this year. Interestingly, he played 90 minutes against Portland in the Open Cup. So, he knows how to hold himself together sometimes. It's just that I think when he picks up one yellow, it can kind of snowball, but I like him as a player. I think I still saw more that I liked than that I didn't like from him in this game. I'm willing to sort of live with the growing pains there. I do hope that there is a open competition at least between him and Nuhu going forward. Nuhu, the thing that kills me about Nuhu is that the mistakes he makes so often are completely mental, checking out type of mistakes that I don't know that he's a veteran player. He shouldn't never be making those types of mistakes, and yet he does it with remarkable regularity. And I just don't know that he doesn't do enough to overcome them, I guess, is in my mind. And maybe I don't know, maybe that's unfair, but I just want to see more of a competition there between those two players. Did anything else from this game sort of stand out to you as worthy of note?
Yeah, I mean, not really. Aside from the two obvious ones of Jesus Ferreira, maybe looks
Yeah.
like he's starting to put things together. I think that's
This is I
probably
think his best performance for the
I think
Sounders.
so. I thought he was really pulling the strings in the first half. Scored a great goal, the kind of goal that I don't think he has the confidence to score a month ago, 6 weeks ago, which is I think it's a good sign. And also that I don't think Danny Masovsky. I don't think there's anything he could do to displace Jordan Morris as the starting forward once Jordan is 90 minutes fit, fully healthy. But he's making it more interesting than than I think you would expect it to be.
Yeah.
And I think that the really nice thing about that is that it allows them to be a little more conservative with getting Jordan back. They can limit his minutes. They can, integrate him more quickly. They can maybe give him a little more time off, down the stretch as we get into summer. In Leagues Cup, maybe you don't feel like you have to start him ever unless you get into the playoff stage. And that's just, I think, a really, really welcome outcome, because it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about the Sounders have got to do something about the backup forward spot. They're not getting any production out of Jesus at that spot. They're not getting any, Lord knows they're not going to get any production out of Masovsky. And now, I mean, he's putting up, Will Bruin type numbers as a
Yeah.
backup forward.
Yeah, he's
And,
got six
you know,
goals in MLS play and 7 goals overall. Those
yeah,
are you'll take those as from your backup striker, I think, any day.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's having on a permanent basis, he's having, I think it's fair to say, a just without qualifier, a really good season.
Yeah.
And that's the Sounders have absolutely needed that this year with the absences they've had and just the general struggle scoring outside of the forward spot.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. Well, why don't we take a little bit of a break? We'll come back. We'll tackle the questions. And yeah, you're listening to Nos Arietes. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. So we got a bunch of questions, and I will start by once again stating that these questions come from our Discord. If you want to join the Discord, you can become a paid subscriber of Sounder at Heart at the supporter level or above. That's $75 a year. We oftentimes throw out discounts for those, so you can even find it for cheaper than that. But if you want to get in on this, I would urge you to become a subscriber. And I'll also add, you've probably noticed this over the last few months, we've been running a lot more ads in our main feed. And if you want to get a version of the podcast that has a lot fewer ads, you can become a subscriber at any level, and you'll get access to the unified feed that is just our core sponsors that the ads run for. So it will be less disruptive to your listening, to your precious ears. So wanted to pitch that to anyone. And you also help support this whole operation by becoming a paid subscriber. Yeah. You'll feel good about yourself. And anyway.
What's the Nos Arietes without a full pull wine ad? Honestly.
Exactly.
It's just not the same. It's not the same.
It's not the same. It isn't. No, there's very few people that have heard a Nos Arietes without a full pull wine in it. So
it's true. Yeah.
You want to start off here?
Let's do it. First one is from Tired Yeti. I know it's excuse me. I know it's dangerous to speculate on someone else's opinion, especially when it's a coach. But what do you sense is the area that Brian wants and expects the team to improve the most in the latter half of the season?
I actually think this one's pretty straightforward. Is he wants this team to be better offensively. I think he understands that as they're ahead of last year's pace. But what's funny is like for a long time they were pacing ahead of where they're scoring from last year. They've actually fallen behind last year's scoring pace. Now that's over the course of the whole season. They were much better from this point of the season forward last year in terms of scoring. So if they were to do that again, they would exceed it. But I think he just wants them to score again. I mean, score more. Like this team is, I think, more offensive minded and better. Like they passed the eye test to me better than they did last year. They've been missing, the fact that Jordan has been out so long and they're still finding ways to score goals is encouraging. But yeah, I think he wants this team to be scoring more goals. Simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to argue with that. It's what I would like to see them improve most in the second half of the season as well. There's just too much attacking talent on this team for them to be below average offensively.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But they're showing positive signs in that area.
Yeah. So this one's from Dudesby. He says, imagine a fictional scenario in which Lumen Field was converted into a massive time machine, and we all spun back a few seasons into the past. One of us accidentally steps on a butterfly, and the past takes on a new reality. The front office signs a DP striker instead of Pedro de la Vega as a DP winger to replace Rui Diaz when his contract is up. With a DP striker and a goal-dangerous Morris on the wing, are the Sounders better in this reality?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
ringing endorsement.
Maybe the striker gets hurt. Maybe the striker sucks. Maybe Jordan Morris is extremely pissed off about getting moved back to the wing after playing so well as a forward and just kind of phones it in. Who knows? I I know people feel like the thing to fix the scoring on this team is getting a striker, and I don't agree with that at all, because I think the Sounders are getting plenty of goals from their strikers. They're not getting goals from anybody else. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jordan Morris had a perfectly respectable number of goals last year. They've gotten a perfectly respectable number of goals from their forwards this year. And I think a lot of people say, when they envision, well, we should just go sign a DP striker, they think, let's just go get a guy that's going to score 25 goals a season. Well, there aren't that
Because
many of those
that's
guys.
right.
Like, it's just, and yes, there are guys that come in and are totally lights out in this league, set it on fire from the start. We have had a couple of them, and I think that in some ways maybe that's changed our perception of what we should expect from DP signings. But I mean, from my in my opinion, there's a reason that I've pretty consistently for the last few years thought that signing a goal dangerous winger was the best thing they could do to improve the offense. It's why I was excited about Ryan Kent after the first couple of games, right? Because he looked like he might be that guy. I think that the problem is not their strikers are not scoring enough goals. The problem is they're the only ones that score the goals. So maybe they're better. I don't know. Maybe that striker they signed is Kevin Dinky, and he, ends up becoming the player he became in that extra year in Belgium here, and is the best striker in the league. It's possible, but they also could have signed any other number of DP strikers that have signed in MLS since PDLV signed and have been bad or mediocre or underwhelming. So
Yeah, I guess if the argument is, I would rather, would the Sounders be better if they were getting more production out of the DP spot that Pedro de la Vega is occupying? And I think the answer is yes, but
yeah, of course.
we're agnostic about what position that person would need to be playing. Like, that person could be playing as a winger. I actually dug into, unrelated to this question, I dug into some stats around their wide production this year, and they have gotten more wide player production from wide players this year than they did last year, although it's been mostly on the assist side. They got 10 goals and 5 assists from their primary wingers and fullbacks last year. They have 6 goals and 12 assists from those same players. So that's just for the purposes of this, I wasn't including Jordan Morris in last year's total. I wasn't including Jesus Ferreira in this year's total. So anyway, that's the primary, and so they've gotten more production, and that's mostly from the fullbacks. But yeah, they aren't getting a lot of goals from wingers right now, and that's the biggest problem. I mean, Pedro is on a per 90 basis is as productive as anyone, and they've got a bunch of players. We actually have a question later on, sort of about this, and maybe we should move that question up, but the problem is that they have a bunch of talented wingers who don't seem to be putting the ball in the net a lot. And I think that's probably more of the issue than it is anything to do with the number 9.
Yeah, agree. Yep.
But since I have the question here, so I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to the section of this Q&A where we talk about this a little bit. But this is from the list, and he says, does Brian's coaching limit players' ability to be creative? And is Brian the one holding back players like Pedro and Kent? And then sort of a similar question. This is based on a story that Brian McKay wrote for Sounder at Heart. And so I'll throw this in there. Twimberly 23 had a similar question about, after reading that article, he was wondering if we should switch to a 3-4-2-1, as that seems like it gets a little bit more out of the attacking players that we have.
Yeah, so I don't know that I'm willing to say that Brian is holding back creative players necessarily. I liked that article that Brian wrote. I thought it was good. I think there's some really interesting points raised in it. I don't think I'm willing to say that it is a Brian Schmetzer problem, that it's purely a tactical problem. I think that there is a problem there somewhere, right? I think that there is something real there that's at least worth thinking about, considering, but I don't know what it is, and I don't think we have enough of a sample size and enough evidence to say for sure. I personally, I understand why they moved to the 4-2-3-1 when they did. I personally I think that they were kind of forced into it. I think circumstances kind of forced their hand. I think those circumstances have changed, and I would really like to see them move back to a more attacking shape. And formations are agnostic, right? I think it's less about the formation specifically that they're playing and more about what they're doing tactically. And I think they were nominally in a 3 center back shape against Austin, right? But I think it still looked a lot more like they've been playing the last few months. So I would
They
like to
built
see
out
them
in the
get back.
three. I mean, they it's
Yeah.
kind of been the consistent thing is they build out with 3 in the back almost no matter who's on the field, and it's sort of the big difference is how they defend and sort of like the role they're asking the wing backs to play essentially. Like
Right.
if they were playing truly with 3 in the back, you would probably have seen Kalani Kosarienzi getting a little bit farther forward in the attack. Although there were times where he was the farthest player forward on the right side, so it is, I don't know, it's I don't know what the answer is, I guess. I think one of the things that Brian identified in this story was that Schmetzer seems to really like wingers who are I'm putting air quote, the correct foot. So he likes right-footed players on the right side and left-footed players on the left side. And we do see that playing out a lot. We've seen we've seen Pedro de la Vega used almost exclusively on the right, even though he's had some real creative moments on the left. We've seen Jesus Ferreira has been mostly deployed on the right when he's on the wing. Ryan Kent almost exclusively had been deployed on the left. So you can the one player who isn't really being used that way is Paul Rothrock, and he's been sort of allowed to move around on either side. I do think it's interesting that Paul Rothrock seems to be the player who is sort of like has to be on the field at all times. I thought he was a really interesting wingback option when he was playing as a wingback early in the season. I think that I understand what he does, and there's also some questions about this, but I don't know what I don't know what the answer is either. How to unlock the creative players, because it does feel like there's enough talent out there. Like if you look at Georgie Manungu, Ryan Kent, Paul Rothrock, Pedro de la Vega, Jesus Ferreira, like there should be goals there, right? There should be a 10-goal scorer in there somewhere, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I will say that I'm not willing to go so far as to say Brian Schmetzer is holding back creative players, because we've seen creative players flourish under Brian Schmetzer. I will say that I think the tactics the Sounders are using this year and for lots of last season are conservative in the attacking phase. And it is more about not allowing yourself to get countered. And so creative players have maybe less opportunity to take chances. And you can, that's not necessarily the wrong decision systemically. Like you can have a system that demands a little bit more discipline, if you want to, to use a loaded word, and still have it be really effective. But I do think that it's going to limit what you can do creatively taking on guys.
Yeah, I also think on sub level, you probably need Albert Rusnak has still been very productive, but you probably need a little bit more from your other central. Like there's a few positions like as good as Obed and Christian have been, neither one of them have provided much scoring punch, and I don't know you need a ton of scoring punch from them, but these are like they've not gotten any offensive production off of set pieces. Last year they were able to do that with a bit more regularity. So I don't know. There's a few areas for potential improvement.
Yep, absolutely. Staying on the theme of the wing, this one's from Almost Cool. Why does Paul Rothrock start pretty much every game, including Club World Cup, but it's still hard for Schmetz to praise him in post-game press conferences, and his salary is so low compared to others? He's at $104K while Reed Baker Whiting is at $130K. Does coach play him reluctantly and pay him less so he'll go somewhere else? Do you think other teams will be interested in him sooner than later?
Well, so I'll just follow up with a few observations. One is Rothrock does in fact lead the team in matches played. He's I believe the only outfield player who has. Oh no, I guess he's missed. No, he's played in every match so far this year. He is not so high up in the table, the team table in terms of minutes played, but he's made 16 starts this year, which is tied for the third most on the team. So he's been you're spot on. He has been a very consistent person in the lineup. I don't know that Paul. I don't know that I have clocked that. I feel like Paul gets a lot of praise from Brian in the post game. I I'm not totally sure I'm feeling you on that one. I think Rothrock is probably in line for a raise. Is sure. I mean, his contract is up. This is his contract year. They had tried to work on a contract with him in the offseason. His agent came to the Sounders with a number they thought was too big, and they said, "Look, if he repeats what he did last year, we won't have any problem giving him that number, but he's going to have to repeat what he did last year in order to get a number like that." And he might. Yeah. I mean, it looks like that could end up happening. I wouldn't rule that out. But he's not a free agent, so that doesn't give him a whole lot of flexibility. And I think where you see the difference between him and like a Reed Baker Whiting is like that's negotiating power for you, right? Like Reed Baker Whiting was a player who was sort of a hot shot, up and coming prospect, and Paul Rothrock was just a player happy to be on a professional contract, and that's sort of what happens. And I that's one of the things I always feel bad about when these contract numbers come out is that you start comparing players at the wrong end of the scale sometimes. Like it's like it's not like let's not knock a guy for getting paid. Let's like we should Paul Rothrock should get paid more. And it's the salaries are not always a perfect reflection of a player's value to the team.
Yeah, agree. I like Paul Rothrock a lot. I'm very glad he's on the team. I think he's a really fantastic guy to have on your roster. I think he can be a solid rotational guy on a championship team, no problem. I'm going to throw some numbers out here. Paul Rothrock, for non-penalty expected goals per 90, 28th percentile amongst attacking midfielders and wingers. Expected assists, 62nd percentile amongst attacking midfielders and wingers. Now, you said the Sounders said if he can repeat what he did last year, we're happy to give him that number. So last year, Paul Rothrock played 1,316 minutes. He had 4.2 expected goals, 3.3 expected assists. He had 5 goals total, 2 assists total, right, in real terms, which are going to be the ones that determine his contract. This year, he has played 66 fewer minutes, 1,250 minutes. 2 goals, 3 assists, 1.7 expected goals, 1.7 expected assists, 1.6 expected assists.
Been a little
so
bit
he's
of
not been
regression.
as good as he was last year.
That's.
And again, those numbers, those rate stats are fine for a rotational guy. I do not understand why he is getting. There's no performance-based reason for him to be getting more minutes than Pedro de la Vega or Georgie Munungu, right? Like, if anybody's got a case to say, hey, what do I got to do to get more minutes? It's Georgie. I think there's an opportunity cost to not giving Pedro those minutes, but I would still rather see Georgie getting more starts than Paul Rothrock. Again, I like him a lot as a player. I just think that there is an element of people like the way he plays.
Yeah.
And they see that as evidence of production and quality performances. And I agree that he's underpaid. I hope he gets paid. I hope he gets life-changing money because I think he's earned it. But I do think I think at times we can get a little over our skis with exactly how much he is contributing and how much value he has to the team.
I would also say that I think he's got a really important place on this team, and I think he's sort of being used as a you've got to beat this guy out type of figure. Like I think he's that totally. Would be my guess is that Brian likes the way he shows up to training every day, the way he likes the effort he puts into the game, and he's telling these. And I think he's probably. I don't think this is even being harsh on him. I think the reality is that of the 5 wingers that the Sounders have sort of competing for these 2 spots, he's the least talented of them. I think it's like like on just a raw ability, but it's up to those players to beat him out. And so on that hand, I don't mind how much time he's getting, because I think one of those players has to just show, like, no, I like, maybe it's Ryan Kent, maybe it's Pedro De La, maybe it's Georgie Manungu. One of them though has to sort of take the position by the neck and just say, no, this is going to be my spot. And
Yeah. And there totally, there is value in that, right? I should be clear, because I don't think I was as clear as I would have liked to be. I think that Paul has earned the starts he's getting, in the sense that nobody has beaten him out. You're right. Like,
right,
nobody
no,
has
it's
shown
not
that
that
they're
he's
going to
being,
produce
you're not
more.
saying he's been gifted these starts
Right.
sort of unfairly.
I'm saying that Pedro De La Vega and Ryan Kent are the guys that you would expect to be starting,
Yes.
and they got their opportunities and they didn't take advantage of them. And Paul Rothrock does everything he's asked, and that's just reality sometimes, right? Like it's if I were the coach, would I be making these decisions? Maybe not, but I'm not the coach, and I don't know anything about locker rooms or player dynamics or man management, right? Like, I just know numbers on a spreadsheet. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. Like, there's absolutely value in having somebody who can act as sort of a role model of, like, this is what I expect from my players, and until you can either clearly outproduce this guy or give me more than he's giving me, and in other facets of the game, you're going to be on the bench, and I think that's totally valid.
Yeah. All right, this one's from Dorcas. He says, at the beginning of the season, the Sounders were considered the deepest team in the league. Fast forward to now, what did the roster build for depth get right? What did it get wrong? What does the future hold?
I think from a purely depth perspective, I don't think you can have any real criticism of this team. I think that the fact that they were able to do as well as they did in the Club World Cup, and then against Austin, missing their top 3 or 4 center backs, depending on how you, or not their top 3 or 4, but at various stages missing 3 of their 4 top center backs.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really hard to question what they've got there.
That they've been missing their DP striker effectively almost all of the year.
Yeah. We just talked about the depth they have at winger. The problem is that they have 4 guys who are playing like depth players, I would say. The midfield depth is maybe the weakest spot, but I mean, when Danny Leva has been asked to play, he's been, I think, extremely good. Joao Paulo has situationally, I think, been really good. At outside back, Reed Baker Whiting, I think, has played well. Kosarenzi has played extremely well. He's really raised his stock this year. So I think Andrew Thomas has been pretty good. Like, there's just nowhere I can point to and say the depth is a problem.
Depth is, yeah. I would totally agree with that. I would say the one thing, if there's been a criticism that was fair, I think people pointed this out. I don't know if this is a surprise, but I think the top end talent is still not up to does not feel championship level right now, and that might just be how it is. Like, that's just, the team is not spending the big money that they need to have the real game changers at the top end of the league. And that said, the teams that are going to be the best in the league are going to have their best players healthy and available the most of the time. And so maybe if the Sounders end up, if they stay healthy, relatively healthy for the rest of the year, maybe that won't even be maybe this will be exactly the team we thought they were, and I think that's sort of that's the challenge, right? Is that you don't really know. Like, right now, I think we were basically right about the depth of this team. I think it's been tested more than we would have hoped, and I think that's really been the challenge. Is just that, if you had told me that Jordan was going to miss 75% of the season up to now, and that they would still be 5th in the league, and not be like they're still able to score goals with some regularity, I think I would have taken that.
The Paul Areola was going to get hurt. as
That
early as he did.
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
That
So
they'd be
it's
missing Yamar and Reagan and Kihi
right. Yeah. I mean,
Hawkins.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the injuries have taken their toll this year. I think that's
Yeah.
that's what we learned really.
I do think it's not that I don't have criticisms of the team and their performance, because I do. I mean, that's why we're here, right? But
Right.
I do think when you consider what they've had to deal with injury wise this season, the fact that they are where they are, because they had to deal with arguably less injury wise last season up to this point, and they were much worse. So I
Yeah.
think that's a testament to the depth.
Yeah.
Next one is
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
just wanted to just add one more thing as far as what the future holds. I think, and I guess if there was something we were wrong about, maybe we were overly rosy about how good we thought Ferrero would be. But given again, it was like if we accept that the Sounders had budget constraints, I don't know how much. Like I think they did well with what they had. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I will also say the question about whether or not to bring Rusnak back seems kind of silly to me now.
Yeah.
Highest paid player on the team, and I think a clear bargain. I think if he was making the sort of elite DP level salary, he'd be worth the money. It's not my money, so easier for me to say. But
Yeah.
anyway, next one, and actually we'll just ask these two as a package deal. First one is from Spaceman Spliff. Do we have more points this year with Nuhu and John Bell playing as they have, or would we have a better record with John Bell as left back / left center back and a 500k CB like Nathan? What do you think we gain or lose by moving on from Nuhu? And the next one is a little more blunt. This one's from, I believe it's AD Simone 206. It might be Ada Simone. Sorry if one of those is right. I hope if I got both of them right, I'm really sorry. Is it time to move on from Nuhu this offseason?
So I think the easier of these questions is if we had basically if you could swap Nuhu for Nathan. I don't know how the Sounders would be really any better off. Maybe he would have played one more game, but like I don't
Right.
I don't know that having an extra center back, a 500k center back, would be raising the Sounders ceiling right now. Like I still that player presumably would not be a starter over Yamar or Reagan. I suppose if you could wave a magic wand and say you could have a better starting player than Yamar, sure. Like I guess a Yamar who has
Right.
his defensive chops and is maybe a little bit better of a passer, sure, I'll take that. But I don't think you're going to guarantee that for 500k. But the more pressing issue is it time to move on from Nuhu? And I think the issue with Nuhu is and was and always has been is can you move him and get any kind of value, like what you feel like is fair value for him? And I think I probably would have said this before. I'll say it again. If you can get anything, if you feel like you can get fair value for Nuhu, I think you can afford to move on. Like I'm more ready to move on. I'll take it back. I'm more ready to move on from him now than I think I have been previously.
Yeah. I'm assuming that the contract details that FBref has is wrong because it says this deal's up this year. I'm assuming he
I
has
don't
an
know.
option.
It's like we have that information on. You keep talking, and I'll look this up.
I will also, just to bounce back to Spaceman Spliff's question.
He's
think
got
the
an
more
option for
interesting
next year.
question. Okay, that's what I figured. I think the more interesting question, rather than a 500k center back, is a 500k left back. Like, you can get a pretty decent MLS
Yeah.
left back for that money, and you don't necessarily feel like you have to play them over Reed Baker Whiting if he earns that spot. And I think the answer is closer to yes than it is for Nathan, center back like Nathan, for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm a little more ready than you to move on. I don't think that's any real big surprise. I don't know if it's like, I'm certainly not ready to buy him out, right, or anything of that nature. But I don't know what I would consider to be fair value to get that cap space back at this point. Like, it's much different than it was 2 years ago. I know that. It's probably more than like a super draft pick, I guess, but it's probably not that much allocation money.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know what I don't even know what I would. I'm not sure what I would feel like is fair value for him. Like if you could get $500,000 in GAM for Nuhu, would you?
I mean, I would snatch your hand off for 500,000. Absolutely.
Fair enough.
I think it's like, let's say they do go back to the 3-4-2-1 and they commit to that, and that's their plan going forward, right? And they make changes to the roster to support it going into next year. Then it's a different thing, because if he is going to be a center back and he's not going to be involved in the attack and he's mostly going to be tasked with doing one-on-one defending, I think he's a lot more valuable, and I think he's a nice player to have on the roster. But if he's going to be expected to get forward, if he's going to be expected to do a little more situational type defending, to me it's not quite salary dump territory yet, but
Okay.
closer than I would have expected to a year or two ago. I think.
Yeah. All right. This is from Matty B, or Matt B. Sorry. Danny Musovsky has elite stats this year, which you've actually done a good job of illustrating. He has scored most times he has started, and he has done so in all the ways that we would have needed by providing a pesky target in the box and relentlessly finding ways to pull the trigger. His scoring streak only ended when he didn't start. Oh, and he's been pretty healthy. What more could he do to prove he should be a locked-in starter?
Run over Jordan Morris with a car, I think is the.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is kind of tough because it's like, in a way, it's like, what else could the guy do than what he's been doing?
Yeah,
but I just think fundamentally, Jordan is just it's not. I don't think it's that hard to explain that when you watch Jordan play, you can see how he changes the game in ways that Musovsky doesn't. Even if he's not I think what Jordan provides is an ability to affect the game when he's not scoring, and Musovsky's value is really it's really his ability to score.
Yeah, he is a poacher's poacher, classic center forward type of player. Although he's not really a classic center forward because he's not necessarily the best in the air. He's not super great at hold up play. He really is a poacher, and I think that on a team, let's say you have a team where you have two DP wingers who are going to score a decent number of goals, and really all you need out of your strikers to bang in rebounds and such.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a great starting nine, but I think for a team like the Sounders, who just aren't getting that kind of contribution from their wingers and aren't really set up to depend on them, Brian Schmetzer likes a striker. He likes a striker that's the center of the offense, that's the centerpiece of the offense, and I think it's just kind of always going to be that way. Not the centerpiece, I guess, because it was Nico's team for so long, but Nico's team was at its best when they had, an elite striker. So yeah, I think on a lot of other teams, he's a perfectly great starting option, but I think for the Sounders, they just really need Jordan.
Yeah, I think kind of with a team that is not, if you had a bunch of offensive powerhouses surrounding Danny Musovsky, I think you can get away with a player who his only job is to put the ball in the net. But the Sounders do need their center forward just to do more than Musovsky mostly does. Now, that's not to take I don't think he's a bad player. I don't think he's the elite number 9 that you sort of need. And I think Jordan at least has the potential to be that. Like when Jordan is scoring, he's doing a lot to help your team, I think, because he does all this other stuff.
Yeah.
That
Danny Musovsky is in some ways like a not poor man's, but like middle class man's Eddie Johnson. Like he's going to score goals. But those Sounders teams where EJ was scoring a lot of goals, I don't think he was the best, the best attacking player on the team by any stretch.
Right.
He did, but next one from Ken W. Which is the more likely scenario? KKR earns the right back position and displaces Alex, or Reed Baker Whiting takes the. I don't know why I did one acronym and one say the name out, but or RBW takes the left back position from Nuhu.
I mean, I think RBW is Reed Baker Whiting is the more likely player to supplant one of the two starting fullbacks. And part of that is just what we've talked about today. I just think that Reed's upside is high enough that I think that they might overlook some of the game to game performances that keep Nuhu in the starting role right now. Whereas I think the bar that Kalani has to clear to just totally supplant Alex Roldan is just higher, because Alex is a very competent player. Like he's I think in some ways that's what's frustrating about him, is that he's just really, really competent. Like he's not an elite. He's not an elite right back. Like he's not going to score you a bunch of goals. He's not going to dish out a ton of assists, but he's going to do everything you ask him to do really competently. And
Yeah.
I think Kalani does some flashy stuff really well. I really like him. I would be very comfortable with him as my starting right back, but realistically, I don't think Brian is like. I would be shocked if we get to an extended period of the season where Kalani is just starting week after week over a healthy Alex, unless Alex just regresses.
Yeah, Alex has been sneaky good this season. Like he hasn't been flashy. He hasn't been putting up the kind of attacking numbers that maybe we've seen in the past. But the part of the issue last year was that he was not contributing either, like in either direction. He was having some rough defensive games. I think he's been really, really beyond solid defensively this year, and I think that the Sounders just have depended less on their fullbacks in the attack this year, which is good. So some of those weaknesses that we saw last year, haven't really been an issue. So I think I agree. In other words, I think it's going to be really hard for Alex to lose his starting spot.
All right. This one is from South Sounder. What have the Sounders done thus far with the $650K in 2025 GAM they received from Colorado in the Atencio trade? And then there was sort of some related questions that I may as well dump in with all this, because it's sort of talking about money. But Matt B is wondering what the Sounders are going to do with the Club World Cup money. And Magua33 is talking about, well, maybe that we'll get into that one. That seems a little bit more separate. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what the Sounders have some salary cap space.
They do,
I guess,
yeah.
is the answer.
And I hope to God they use it. I mean, it really is. I think last year it was more pressing because the team sucked. At this point in the season, the team they just stank out loud, and that's not the case this year. But it would almost be more annoying if they didn't use it this year, because last year I think you could make the case. It's like, well, what's even the point? Like,
right?
Let's just open up the cap space and leave it. This year, it feels like if they had another piece that could really contribute, that they could potentially make a run at something. Now, I'm sure Adrian would say, well, we stunk last year at this point, and then we didn't sign anybody, and we almost made MLS Cup. So why should we spend the money? Which, fair enough, I guess.
I mean,
but yeah, I hope they use it.
Yeah, and the reason I put it together with this is because they are, not only do they have salary cap space, they have about $1.2 million of salary cap space right now, and some of that money I'm sure will be rolled into next year, and that's not a crazy thing to do. But they have more than enough salary cap space to sign a U22 and maybe even sign another veteran if they want to do. But really what they have is we know they have cash. Like they just got $9.5 million from the Club World Cup. And I'm sure Adrian will say, well, we got to invest. We've been losing all this money in other places. We got to invest it in the academy, or we got to invest it in these other things. But you know what? Like fans don't want to hear that. And I don't blame fans for not wanting to hear it. And I'm tired of hearing it too. They should go into this window with a real transfer budget. And the fact that I keep hearing that they don't have much of a transfer budget is driving me crazy. I don't understand. Like, if they're not going to go out and spend at least $3 to $5 million on a U23. I guess that would be the argument for not signing someone, is that you just don't have a budget for it. And I don't think there's but I don't think you can come up with a good justification for not having a budget, knowing that they just got this windfall of money, frankly. Like, a lot of it isn't going to the players. We know that. $1 million of that 9.5 is going to the players. So where's the rest of the money going? And I think I would hope the Sounders are going to answer that question at some point, because it's going to be a really frustrating. I just don't see how they're going to be able to look us in the face and say, like, yeah, we had this windfall of money. We didn't have any transfer budget. Like, insanity. Like, and I hope that's not what happens. But that would be really. So the answer, I guess, to Matt's question is we don't know. We don't know what's going on with the Club World Cup money, and the Sounders don't technically have to tell us, I guess, which is also
they have to tell MLS, I'm sure, but
right.
They, it's. And look, if the answer is, look, we really need this money to plug holes elsewhere, show
us, right?
Because I'm sure they did lose a bunch of money during COVID. They also made a ton of money leading up to COVID. Yeah, so did everybody. They took out a bunch of money in loans that they never have to pay back from the government, which I'm fine with. I don't think that's a horrible thing to have done by any stretch. But yeah, I just you can't just keep. I guess what I'm getting at, what I believe, is that I don't think they want to spend money. I just think it's that simple. I don't think they want to spend money on players unless they feel like they absolutely have to.
Right.
They don't see a need to do it. They're not like this. You always hear, well, we're not going to spend money just to spend money. We're not going to spend money just to spend money. And that to me is, I do not want to spend money. That's what that says to me. Like, what do you mean I don't want to spend money just to spend money? What are you talking about? You're not spending money you're spending money to make the roster better, to make the team, to give yourself a better chance at winning games. That's the whole point of what we're doing here. It is not to limp into the postseason and hopefully make a run because you have a coach
because it's MLS and that
once in a lifetime.
Sometimes.
Yeah, that's not. You're selling an entertainment product with a season that lasts 13 months of the year. Like. Give people a reason to give a shit, to go to the games, to care, to get invested in April or whatever. Like, it's maddening. It's maddening. And when you've got teams regularly setting new transfer records, I think something like $60 million in total transfer spending in the last couple of windows.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
And
now, of course, you can look at who we just played. The Sounders just. Look, you can look across at Austin, and I'm sure they do, and they say, look, they spent $10 million on Brandon Vasquez, and they spent $10 million on this winger who looked like garbage against the Sounders, whose name I can't even remember right now. And then he spent $12 million on this Albanian striker who wasn't even on the field for him, and look at where that's gotten them. They've got 15 goals this year. Okay, so don't spend the money dumbly. Like, have more faith in your
spend the money on good players. Yeah.
Have more faith.
And here's the thing: I'm not asking them to spend $15 million.
Right.
I'm asking them to spend 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that is what I'm asking for. And it's not asking too much for a football club in the year 2025, an MLS in 2025, that just got a potentially once in every couple of decades financial windfall. Spend some of that money on the team.
Yeah.
It's not asking too much. I'm sorry. I don't. And if that is too much of a financial burden, if it is not a preference, right? If it is not a philosophy of the business that you have, but it is an actual existential threat to spend $3 million on a transfer fee, then you got to either hit the Mega Millions or find some new investment, because that is not asking too much.
Yeah. Well, I think I want to take one more break because this is a long segment. So we're going to take one more break. We'll come back and we'll finish this up. You're listening to Nos Audietis. All right, welcome back to Nos Audietis. Hopefully you enjoyed those ads, and I'll just remind you that if you didn't appreciate those ads, you could have just become a subscriber to Sounder at Heart and listen to us on our more ad-free segment, and you would have been able to avoid them. So there's an encouragement for you to either, if you're already a subscriber, go subscribe to the private RSS feed. Otherwise, anyway, thanks for
subscribe to the private RSS feed, but keep playing the episodes with
exactly
the ads, with the volume turned off. Like, just put them on when you're at work or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No one's
would help
watching
us
you.
out.
Yeah.
Right.
We do get credit for every time those ads play. So I don't want to undermine ourselves too much. But anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Next question is from Magua33. Early in the season, I was eagerly awaiting the windfall of cash that we'd be able to reinvest in a roster with the seemingly impending sale of Obed. The more I've thought about this, I wonder if it would just be a net negative on our roster. Could we even replace him given our current roster construction? No open DP spots, up against the cap, and Obed not hitting our cap. Feels like any Obed sale would just mean more money for the team/owners, but have little to no impact on our ability to bring in players or help our roster. If you were playing GM, are you selling, or would it take Obed to almost kick the door down and force his way out?
This is actually a really good point. And I think that we sometimes overlook this reality is that Mog was right. Like, the reality is that the Sounders trade or were to get $10 million for Obed right now and move him at, whenever in the summer. Really, all they've done is they've had a net loss of one of the best young players in the league. And the reality is that they can't really maximize the return on that because sure, they could go out and sign a U22, but like we said, they should already have money in the budget for that. So maybe they could add an extra U22, but that, even best case scenario, that U22 is not going to immediately fill the hole left by Obed. And so really the dream scenario, I think, is that you find someone to buy Obed at the price that you want to sell him for, and they loan him back to you for the rest of the year. Kind of like the DeAndre Yedlin situation. I don't know how realistic that is, but yeah, I mean, I think what we should probably all be rooting for is that Obed continues to ball out, and then in the winter he gets moved, because then in the winter you have a lot more flexibility about what you can do with that. Because then you could potentially create an open DP spot if you wanted to.
Right.
But yeah, like the way the roster is set up right now, they don't have the ability to totally maximize on a sale from Obed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. I think I actually don't think the idea of selling him and getting him back on loan is that far fetched, because I think that the kind of money the Sounders are looking for is a little harder to find from the clubs of the caliber Obed would be landing at. Like, they're out there. There are clubs where Obed could go in and be a starter or a regular rotational player or whatever right away. But I think more likely it's going to be bigger clubs who like his potential, who are going to loan him out anyway. Kind of like the Yedlin and Tottenham situation. I can definitely see a team in Spain or France that views him as a guy for a year or two down the line. But they want to, they want him to keep developing somewhere else because they don't have the minutes for him. Saying like, yeah, we just want to have him. We want to have his rights, but you can have him the rest of the year. And that would be obviously ideal. Selling him in the winter would be second best. But I do think the point is a great one, right? I don't blame anyone for being skeptical of what would happen with that money. I think even if they sell Obed and all of that money goes into something like the academy or enhanced scouting budgets, whatever it is, stuff that I do think is beneficial, that can really help the team in the long run. I don't blame anybody for saying, no, I want you to spend money, to bring players in. But I think that ultimately you have to sell Obed as a proof of concept.
Yeah.
Because like, if your academy is going to be a profit center, which is really, I mean, maybe not the ultimate goal. I think the Sounders view their academy as more of a cheap source of talent, right? Which is totally valid as well. But I do think if you're trying to convince players of a higher caliber to come to your academy versus an academy in somewhere else, or potentially like a player who would have the ability to go play at an academy in Europe for dual citizenship reasons or whatever it is. You have to be able to point to a success story, right? And it can't be
Yeah.
DeAndre Edwin because that was 10 years ago and he didn't really come through the academy.
Can't be
So
Jordan
I
Morris.
think that right. So yeah, I think that it's just like it's important to do for one because Obed's going to go play somewhere else and you want to get money for him. But for two, to kind of say like, look, we produced this kid. We found him in Alaska. He plays for the Mexican national team. He's playing in Europe now. Like I think that's a pretty compelling story to tell at 14-year-old's parents.
Yeah. I just want to add something about Obed. I was curious. So Atletico just bought Johnny Cardoso for $35 million. Now, granted, he was playing at Real Betis, so they a little bit more of a proof of concept. They're buying a little bit more of a known quantity. But man, it's funny if you compare his radar chart to Obed. Obed just like kind of blows him out of the water, frankly, in a lot of ways. Now, different levels of I realize it's not apples to apples comparison, but man, it does make me realize that there's money for a player like Obed in the transfer world. Cardoso's essentially 40 years older than Vargas too. But yeah, you can definitely see how why players or why coaches and talent evaluators like Obed so much. All right.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, go.
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like sometimes when people watch Obed, they expect him to be like the best player on the team, and that's not really the point with Obed. The point is that he is as good as he is, and he is 19. So
right. Yeah. All right. Well, this one's from R. Shearer. The League's Cup is really hard to get out of the playoffs, and if we want, we can talk about that a little bit too. But it's possible that a team wins all 3 group matches and doesn't even get to the knockout stage of the tournament. How should the Sounders handle the last 2 matches if they lose the first one against Cruz Azul? Experiment players in position, and I'll just in case people forgot, just to kind of give some framework for this. The League's Cup is going to a different format. It's kind of similar to what they called the Swiss system, I believe. It's kind of like similar to the European Champions League and Europa League competitions, where there's the Sounders are in the MLS group, but they play all teams against they're drawn against teams from Liga MX, Liga MX, and only the top 4 MLS teams and the top 4 Liga MX teams advance out of the 18 that are playing in this. So it's a kind of a crazy, like, it's great that they're going to play 3 games against Liga MX teams, but like you almost have to go. I mean, I would think 7 points is probably the least amount of points you're going to be able to get out of that phase of the game.
Yeah, I like the system, but it's very funny to whittle that big of a group of teams down to that small of a group of teams. Like I think in like it's I think more like at least half and ideally more of the team should probably get through in a system like this.
Yeah,
but,
whatever.
I don't care if the Sounders make it to the playoffs in League's Cup. In fact, I would rather they didn't. I hate the League's Cup. I resent having to pay attention to it. I'm sure if they make a run, I'll have fun with it, but I don't. Two of these 2 international club competitions, three of them in one season it's too damn much, man. There's just a limit to how much I can care about this stuff, and this is the least prestigious of them. So it's great that they can qualify for Champions League through it. So if they get to if they can win a final and get in the Champions League, that's wonderful. But I want them to play the Defiance against Cruz Azul and the Academy against the other 2 teams, as far as I'm concerned. So,
well, I don't mind them playing. I think it makes sense to use your starters against Cruz Azul just because there's a bye that first week in the they have basically 2 weeks. There's a 2-week period, or there's a bye in between the league game.
Right.
So there's like a stretch of games where they're able to actually focus on playing in League's Cup. And honestly, even if they win that first game, I still think you probably rotate heavily. Like, I think this is an Andrew Thomas tournament.
Yep.
Straight up. I think like I think you try a lot of stuff in the League's Cup. There's no reason at all that you should be, especially given the group they're in, where Cruz Azul looks like they'll be really good. I just think rotate is the answer. I totally agree.
Yep. Agree. This one's from Toxic Ribbit. Which of the Sounders gained most from Club World Cup playing time? Who seems ready to turn up the heat in the second half of the season? Whatever happened about talks to change to a fall, winter, spring season? Is that a thing
Stuck
now?
in a few
Quite a few questions there.
Well, let's I'll rapid fire the first one. There's still talks about changing the schedule. We don't know when that's going to happen, but it's not happening right now. They basically tabled that. As far as the crux of your question is who really won more playing time, I think, in Club World Cup. I don't know. I really thought, I thought Reed was going to come out of this as the player who had the most upside, frankly, because I thought because this was a huge opportunity to start against Austin. And I think maybe he wasted some of that goodwill. Like there was I think a chance that he could, if he had not gotten kicked out of this game, I think there was a decent chance he would have started against Columbus. And then, you kind of see where it goes from there. Right. But I don't know that anyone who wasn't already a bang on starter did a whole lot to win, like to change their trajectory.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I do think it was more about the depth guys stepping up.
Yeah. All right. This is from Kai Fei. Between Rothrock, Pedro, Jesus, Kent, Georgie, we seem to have too many wingers. Are any of them likely to get transferred this summer window?
I would disagree that we have too many wingers. Actually, I think we have a good amount. I think it's. I like our depth there. And the only way I can see any of them going in the summer is, I don't know. Someone makes a Godfather offer for Rothrock maybe and says, "Hey, we know this guy's contract is expiring, and we want him. We want to build, want him to be a key player for us." I don't know.
I mean, I could see. I think of those five, I think Pedro is probably the one who is most movable. And I could see it happening. I don't think the Sounders, contrary to, I think, popular belief, I don't think the Sounders are itching to get out of Pedro's contract. I think they would be willing to listen to offers, but I kind of think they still like his upside. I don't know that he's quite as buried as the perception seems to be. And if he can get going, good for him. So I don't know. I think if they got of those five, I think Pedro is maybe the one that's most likely to leave. But I agree with you. I don't think it's that they have too many. I think they have too much talent and not enough production out of that group.
Yeah, I think if two of those guys were producing at the level you would expect them to, like if Pedro and or Kent and or Jesus were performing at the and Jesus is getting there, frankly. Then you'd feel great. Like that's the perfect situation, right? You've got 1A, 1B, and then clear depth guys, and then you've got a guy who could probably be a starter on a lot of teams. Perfect situation.
It does get interesting next year though when you have Ariola coming back, because I would think that it does get crowded, I guess is what I'll say. It starts to get pretty crowded if you have Paul in there too.
Yeah, I mean, I can see a world where Paul goes and gets his payday somewhere else, and it's the best thing for all parties. Like I can see them saying, "We just don't have space for you," I guess. But I could also see them trying to move Kent or Georgie or something. So yeah. Next one is from Danicus. Most of the top of the roster have guaranteed contracts through 2027, with the Sounders having With the Sounders seeming to continually have salary budget restrictions, how much of that could potentially be caused by not staggering these contracts out a bit more? It doesn't feel wise to have Jordan, Pedro, Christian, Ariola, and Ferreira all have their contracts up in 2027.
I don't know that that is a huge concern for me. It's 2 years out. There's plenty of room to fiddle around with those. I suppose, I don't know that Christian is going to run his contract up to the very end. I don't know that Jordan is. And even if they were all to sort of run out at the same time, I suppose you could just do a hard reboot. I don't think I really have a huge concern about that.
Yeah. I think there's a genuine possibility that Jordan restructures his deal after this season. I would not be shocked at all to see something like that happen, and he dips back below the DP threshold for more guaranteed money over a longer time frame. So that's one thing. I think Rusnak's contract is his is 2026, right?
Yes.
But yeah,
you might actually have an option for. Well, I can look it up right now.
I think it was 2 plus an option. But yeah, I would much rather have a bunch of guys expiring at once than have
Rusnak's option is for 27. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I would much rather have a bunch of guys whose contracts expire at once than have a situation where you've got to eat kind of a dead cap space like we did with Ruidiaz last year and Ladera the year before. I think that's a worse situation to me. So
yeah,
I mean the reality is you kind of have to plan a few years out. Like you just have to do it. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. All right. This is from Spaceman Spliff. How badly does Pedro need to play / not make the pitch before we move him off of a DP spot for 2026? If that happens, does Craig have any budget to bring in a new DP that will actually start most of our games?
I think that the more we've talked about this throughout the show in various ways tonight, I am more convinced than ever that Pedro is not playing as a motivational tool. I really am starting to think that it's more that about trying to get him into a headspace to win that job, that starting job. So I think it's less about performances because Pedro has been statistically of the Kent, Rothrock, De La Vega triumvirate. He's statistically been the best of those 3, I believe, in most ways. I like the way he plays. I like the way he plays defense. He presses really, really effectively. Obviously, that's not the biggest thing you're looking for from your DP winger, but I think that it speaks to his desire to see the field and to play more. So yeah, I think that at some point he's probably going to get a run of starts, and hopefully he can take advantage of them. I mean, if he keeps up this level of production through the rest of the season, and he doesn't show signs of having taken a step forward just from an eye test perspective, I mean, I think it's probably a conversation that they have to have. You probably have more insight to how the organization feels about him, and you kind of alluded to the fact that maybe they're higher on him than the fan base is at this point. I'm still very high on him. I still think he's going to, in the end up being a really good player and prove to be a good investment, but he certainly needs to start showing that soon if these questions are going to go away.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if he falls further down, if he's playing less in the second half of the season than in the first half of the season, I would think moving him becomes a pretty big point of emphasis in the off season.
Yeah.
But if he's playing, if he stays steady, I don't know that he's going to get, I don't know if they're going to, I don't know. We'll see. I think there's an idea, maybe a belief among people that they can keep him without him being a DP. And I'm not saying that's what Spaceman Spliff is suggesting, but as far as I know, if he's back next year, he's going to be a DP. It might change in 2027. There might be a way to not make him a DP in 2027, but he's going to be a DP if he's back next year, as far as I know. So, yeah, I mean, I would think that if he, again, I think that's probably a good mark, is that if he's slipping down the depth chart from where he is now, I would think that's a good sign that they probably will be trying to move him.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if I don't know what like I will say this, is they have to be in a situation where they buy him out. I don't think they're going to suddenly have budget to replace him. Like that's like they didn't buy out Raul. I really I don't know that they're going to buy out Pedro. Like I don't see that happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard for me to envision a scenario where they can't get back at least enough to cover the prorated portion of his transfer fee.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I am fairly confident, assuming they don't have to eat a ton of money. I am reasonably confident that Adrian would actually make money available or I should say the club, because it's not, it's the club's money, not Adrian's necessarily, but that there would be money available for a DP transfer fee if need be. I think
You'd hope.
would prioritize free agents. I think they would try to find a free agent first. I don't think they would be spending the kind of money I think people would hope for them to be spending. I don't think the Sounders are ever going to be spending the equivalent of $20 million transfer fees. I just don't think it's going to happen as long as they have the current business model that they do. But I think there would be a budget for a transfer fee if they felt like they had to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Last question from Dorcas. Way back in the day, wow, great timing. It's almost like you planned this. Way back in the day, Joe Roth and Adrian said they were never going to take money out of the Sounders, but they weren't going to put it in either. They wanted the budget in the black. I say this because my question is how have cost deficits, MLS decisions / rules, even COVID-19 affected the Sounders financially? The team was once one of the huge revenue drivers for the league and now is much lower than it was, minus the fact of big money teams joining since the earlier days.
Yeah, so the Sounders are still one of the higher revenue teams. Not the highest, but I believe they're still in the top third in terms of revenue. They, I believe, are the highest revenue team among the teams who aren't the primary tenants or don't control their own facility. So the Sounders still make a fair amount of, have a fair amount of revenue, but they also have some of the highest costs in the league. I know renting, just to open up Lumen Field costs like $500,000 a game. So their rent on Lumen Field is, call it $10 million a year, which is a pretty big hole to start from, especially when some of these teams are probably spending half of that. So I do think that the cost of running an MLS business is going up and has gone up a lot from those early days. I still don't think Adrian is taking money out of the Sounders. I don't think he's just lining his pockets. I think they probably still try to run about even, but that is also why I think we're not seeing big transfers, is because they can't really afford to make big transfers and still, basically run a break-even business. Like they would have to go into the red quite a bit more if they were to spend more on transfers. So I do think those are things that are those are the realities. But I don't know I don't know how much sympathy I have either for that situation. Being a professional sports team owner is not supposed to be a money-making operation on a year-over-year basis. That's just not.
Yeah.
That's not why you get into the business. If you want a cash positive business, there's a lot of businesses out there that you can get into. You're making a long-term investment here. And if you're going to make a long-term investment, sometimes you got to go in the red sometimes on a year-to-year basis. And I'm not trying to be out here spending someone else's money, but I do think it's actually important and worthwhile for the Sounders to run a sustainable operation, but they have to they still can't just not be a professional sports team. And then they're not. I mean, whatever. They're still it's not like they're running nickel and diming everything, but I do think that the league has changed a lot, and there's a lot of really rich owners who are willing to take losses And I don't know that I don't think the Sounders are among that group right now, and that's leading to some disparities in the way that teams run their businesses.
And I think too, like I'm glad you made the distinction between running a sustainable business and running a business that has at the very least a balanced budget every year, running in the black every year, right? Because look at the equity the current ownership has in the team versus when they bought into the team. It is worth 10, 20 times as much as it was.
Yeah, they bought it for $30 million, and they're worth about $800 million right now.
So much more than 10, 20 times as much.
Yeah, it's closer to like 30. It's closer to 30 times their initial investment.
And like if I have, 30 times as much equity in my house as I paid for it, right? And I use some of that equity to make upgrades to the house, like that's not financially irresponsible,
right?
That's a thing people do all the time, and it ends up a lot of the time benefiting them in the long run because it makes the house worth even more.
Right.
Yeah, I do think that the conflating we never want to run losses with we want to run a sustainable business is it's a neat little rhetorical trick. Because an MLS team that never spends money on transfers is not a sustainable business. Like it's not. It's gonna get passed up pretty quickly. So.
Yep. Well, we've gone a little long. We're closing in on an hour and a half, so probably a good place to call this a segment. But thank you so much for everyone submitting those questions. We'll try to be a little bit more prompt when we do these. But so we'll probably be like 3 weeks away. We'll do another one in July. With all that said, thank you to everyone. If you want to get in on this action, please consider becoming a subscriber at the supporter level or above. You'll get access to their Discord. I'm sure you've heard all about it, but it's good times. Thank you to our sponsors, Full Pull Wines, Hacks and Ferments, and thanks, Aaron. Thank you, Lickett. I'm Jeremiah Shan. This is No Sadietis, and remember, you'll never be out alone.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.